Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Call of Juarez, Bound in Blood, very hard walkthrough. This is Act 3, and it's called I Don't Even Know Who You Two Are Anymore. So as we move through this story, there are three brothers. There's the priest guy, there's the guy with the big nose, and then there's the dude with the lasso voiced by Troy Baker. That is, of course, the names as written in the script. And it is the priest who is kind of seeing the degradation of these character arcs, and I don't think they had much grace to begin with, the brothers, but whatever grace they had, they're steadily losing it with their antics going through the game, and you're going to see this divide that's growing between them develop in the story, and the story in this game is actually a lot better than I remember. There's a lot going on here, and it's just another feather in the cap of a really, really cool shooter that some people might not have played. But we're coming up on a relatively difficult sequence here. There's a couple of firefights in this segment. I think there's even the demo firefight, if you remember the Bound in Blood demo. Way back on 360, I actually played the demo for this game. It's the reason that I ended up renting it. And I'm really happy that I did. I had a good time with this game. This game even had a multiplayer that you can't access on PC because I don't think it's part of the parcel. And that you can't even play it on console anymore because I think the servers have gone down. But it was actually pretty good because you died really fast. So it was about being lethal. It was about being tactical and lethal, and I had a decent time with it. I had a decent time with the game as a whole, and when I think back of Bound in Blood, I always get that excited feeling because I just remember how special it felt at the time. And I don't think this is the best game in the world. I think that this is a fun game, and it's a game that's ambitious and it's got cool things and it's well realised. But the way I feel about it is so much nicer and better than even the game is, because it's just got a special place in my nostalgia. And coming back to it to make this walkthrough and sharing it with you guys has just been an absolute gem and a joy for me because it's held up so well. It's held up better than I thought it did. Oh, right now, guys, he talks about wanting a horse to pull the door open, but you don't need to do that. You just have to throw dynamite at it. But if you look at this, there's no signposting so that you're supposed to do that, and I really appreciated this moment. In as much as I was thinking, you don't use a horse for this, there's no horses around here. I was quandering what he was on about with the horse thing, and then I threw the dynamite and it blew it up anyway, and I'm like, yeah, you meant to dynamite it, but the fact he says that, it's almost like the anti-waypoint. He's giving me ideas that don't even work, and I really appreciated that one, Troy Baker, you bastard. You're in every video game now, but at this point, in 2009, we didn't even know your name, son. Now, we don't ever want to see you again. But back in these days, you were a national treasure. But move through the buildings. Once again, guys, check the bodies for weapons. Do what you can. Pick up as much that will help you in your war against every single other person in these sandy plains with a weapon. And be real careful on these close quarter sequences. These are the areas where you can die quite quickly. And I think the reason why you do die fast in this game sometimes and other times you don't is because not only do the guns fire slowly, so you can get hit really hard, but then the next shot doesn't come for quite some time, but additionally they also miss. There's this missing system which I'd love to know the statistics on. It's about time I started reaching out to some of these developers. I wonder what they're doing these days, the Techland guys. I wonder if they've got like a Twitter where I can DM them and be like, dude, it says that you were one of the lead programmers on Bound in Blood. Can you remember what was going on with the way that the enemy's damage and their hit percentage was governed? Because I can't figure it out. This is the type of shit I should be bringing to you guys in these commentaries. Some solid foundations from the people that made them. But I need to do webcam, I need to do booby thumbnails, and I need to constantly refer to you as guys in a really high-pitched voice for my numbers to reflect the kind of sway I would need for all these people to speak to me. Alas, YouTube is a poisoned well that we still sip from, but we begrudgingly do so. Oh, I got $10 then, and look at the damage, see that? Whew, that's a bit more like it. I believe that was because it was a Gatling gun though. And that right there is the game stealing my aim. Whenever you see me wobble the camera like that, guys, it means I'm pissed off at something, and it's a manifestation of my impatience. Which is funny, because look at that. That's more like it. Did you see that damage? There we go. Can you imagine if the whole game was that kind of damage threshold? You would have to play like an absolute bitch the whole time. Part of me kind of wishes it was that way. Part of me is very happy it's not. Because it would... Oh, this is a cool moment. You can use your ability here, and I totally just did. I don't know how he shoots this many times, but we'll not think about that. It's a video game. We'll pay our sins for our deeds in reloads. But I do like how the guns change as they get better too. You'll notice they start off all rusted and dark and dirty, and then they gradually go towards being a silver colour or a plated colour, and then they go gold, and so on, and with nice handles and grips. But there's your checkpoint. If you're ever wondering if you've got a checkpoint, it always shows up on the screen like that, and there's no excuse not to notice it. This segment here, Thomas is going to do his gymnastics, and we're going to be tasked with protecting him, which means there's a roof to my right that I have to shoot some people on top of it. Unfortunately, these guys, they speak and they get into position before they shoot, and I think that that's another one of those programming gifts that makes this a lot easier than it could have been. The dynamite, though, not a good thing, and the blur on the screen. I've no idea why my screen was so blurry then. It could have been a concussion from the dynamite. That is a mechanic that needs to die. I don't know how you guys feel about blurs in video games, but I feel like they're their enemy. They're the enemy of precision. And since I moved to PC, I turn everything off like that. Depth of field turned off, motion blur turned off. I tried to get rid of as much of it as possible, but in this game, because it was an older game and an older port, it just doesn't have that kind of measure of control. That's the reason why I didn't adjust the FOV and things like that. It is playing at a higher frame rate and a higher refresh rate, which I had to do some tweaking for. So the game does feel good to play and it does feel nice, minus the stuttering that happens. But, yeah, oh, that guy's invincible, that's good to see. I wonder if the chickens were invincible. I didn't shoot the animals in this because I was too busy trying to get shit done. Guy up there on the balcony doing some serious damage to me, another guy just there. Like, right now, I'm one bullet away from death. It doesn't look like it, but I am. So interesting how quickly you can go down in this game when the game decides to put you down. Oh no, all you're waiting for now, guys, once you shoot that explosives, is for the mountainside to kind of collapse. So you can just sit where I am and just wait for it all to crumble down, and then we're going to be pushing forward. And there's a segment coming up here that I don't really agree with when you're playing with Ray. So there are some sharpshooters coming up, and the game wants you to push forward between cover to get to them, to get in range to kill them. They don't need to get in range to kill you, and they kill you really quickly. And because we're using Ray, we have double pistols, and I don't have a rifle, which is my fault. I died here a dozen times, because if they shoot you, see that? That was a lucky shot just then. There's times when they'll instantly kill you. Like, this is the box I jumped up on to peek, and they killed me in midair, to give you an idea. These guys are so accurate, they will headshot you at the peak of your jump. And it's something else. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pull as far back as I can so I can glimpse a little bit of them, and I'm going to just flick in and out of cover like that to get the shots off. I'm not going to be accurate, I'm just going to shoot in their vicinity, and when I see that skull fill up, I know I'm okay. But right now, I don't think I can even hit this guy because I'm not close enough. Oh yeah, I am. This is close enough, thankfully. Any other distance away from where I am, you can't hit this guy because you don't have the range, and they kill you so quickly, so it was quite a frustrating segment until I found that box and I found that particular technique just then. But right now, I don't have the range. See how it didn't go red? If the reticle doesn't go red, you cannot kill them. And I have no idea what planet a bullet stops travelling at 200 yards. I don't get that. I can appreciate that they lose speed and they lose, you know, their penetration power and a lot of their damage. But they're still a fucking bullet at the end of the day, you know? So it's just, make it hit, but make it do less damage. And I feel like the game just doesn't want to do that, and I can respect it. The damage in this game is nuclear at all times. You're always doing pretty damn good damage, and then every so often you get a guy like that who takes 4 shots to his shoulder and doesn't react, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Raw Deal. And it's because we're supposed to do this. The reason he took that many shots is because I'm not meant to shoot him. He's meant to be alive for this part. Which I really like these segments. Can you imagine if you could control 2 mice on that section? I kind of want to learn to do that. Can you imagine being able to do 2 mice at the same time, having that kind of hand independence? That would be fucking sick, right? I've never used a mouse with my left hand. I would probably be worthless. I'd probably be like that kid from In-Betweeners, you know, when he has sex for the first time and he just looks like a weird fish flopping up and down and it's awkward as fuck. That would be the human sex equivalent of my left-handed mouse hand. But Thomas is still on the high ground, which means there's a couple more rooftops that need to be assailed. And I don't know about you guys, but when I think about cowboys, I think about grown-ass men on top of wooden houses falling off them into hay. Because that's pretty much every image of every cowboy show ever made as I was growing up. And that guy hit me really hard just then. That dude hit me so hard I went deaf. Which you've got to love that, don't you? When you start taking big damage in video games and it blinds you, deafens you, sends a fucking telegram to your mum with a picture of your bloody dick. Like, what are they doing? I'll never understand why in our most dire moment we have all that bullshit against us. We've just practically lost. We've just been shamed into oblivion because we weren't good enough to avoid the damage, even though it's fucking hit scan, so how would you? And then that's what they do. If anything, it should be the opposite, right? You should be a walking piece of blind, deaf shit, and then the moment you get wrecked enough, you should finally come alive like the pregnant woman lifting the car off the child that's on fire. That's what you should become. And I don't understand it. Like, I understand punishing a player for making a mistake. I feel that's a fundamental part of the feedback loop. But making him stare through a kaleidoscope of bukkakied blood? Come on now. And the deaf thing's just silly. Because, I mean, I've never been shot enough to have my vision blur with my own blood, but I like to think that my ears would be fucking fine unless they fired the gun next to it and blasted out my eardrums. But it's one of those wonderful gamey moments, isn't it? It's as natural as doing something 3 times to win, or finding a key that unlocks a very specific door instead of squeezing through the obvious window next to it or breaking the latch. This is weird too. This is also very dangerous. The game wants you to get on a Gatling gun, but when you get on the Gatling gun, you might as well just wave your hand to all the Mexicans so they can shoot the shit out of you. I don't even know if these people are Mexicans. For all we know, these are just good old American boys that are all balding with mustaches and questionable accents. I don't know. We're not looking for political correctness in our westerns. We just want to shoot dudes. Shoot dudes and take names. But when you get on the Gatling gun, you get wrecked. You have to be really, really careful. And there's a wonderful, cheeky teleport to get on the Gatling gun without jumping in the wagon. You can do it from the back. The problem is, when you get off it, it doesn't drop you out the back. It puts you in the middle. So right now, if I have to get into cover to heal, if I overextend, I have to jump off this wagon and get behind it. And when you get behind a wagon wheel that has no cover at all, you are essentially holding your breath and wishing not to die. Because right now, if I take a bullet, I'm dead. And they can easily shoot me if they want to because they have perfect aim and I'm hiding behind the spokes in a bicycle. Like, it's stupid. But this is all you've got, you know, so you've got to make it work. But get back on the Gatling gun once you're healed and try your best to put some people down. The Gatling gun is pretty strong. Not quite as strong as that guy's gun, though, Jesus. And there you go. Sequence is done. And you might recognise this segment coming up from the demo, because this is the place where the demo took place. This is also a difficult segment. When I was doing this on my stream on hard, I died here a couple times because you have to respect this next sequence. There are people all around you in all kinds of distances and all kinds of vantage points, and they kill you too quickly for you to not know where they are. So I'm going to be very passive and very defensive, but luckily we have the volcano gun. And the volcano gun, as its statistics show right now, is a monster when it comes to damage. This gun is very satisfying and very good. I like it a lot. Dropping the gun that I dropped might not have been the best choice, because I like, in the early days, to take some speed along with the volcano. But a ranger and a volcano is about as much damage as you need in this part, and it should get us through fine. But did you see the damage I took? I think that was one bullet. One rifle round from somebody real angry at me. And that's all it takes, guys, on this difficulty. You go down real quick. As evidenced by some of the moments where I've took big damage, it doesn't look that hard. And none of the walkthroughs I've made really do. That's the problem, isn't it? You go to YouTube, you watch a video of somebody doing it, you don't see the fails, you see the victory. Victories don't really teach us much. Not compared to the defeats. You know, it's the defeats that learn you back on the right path to those victories. And unfortunately, this walkthrough would be considerably longer and there'd be way more downtime of me talking if I kept all the deaths in. In this project, I did get quite fortunate. There's only a couple of areas where I died multiple times. All my other deaths were usually from a dynamite or overextending and being too aggressive. And that's easily remedied, you just hold back a little bit. If I was ever to make a first-person shooter, I would make it so that being aggressive was probably the best way to play it, and being defensive was the more dangerous choice. I feel like if you have the speed, the wits, the reflexes, and the hand-eye coordination, you should be able to be very lethal. It's a philosophy that I think Vanquish nailed absolutely when it comes to third-person shooters, and I think if we could have that in a first-person shooter, it'd be really nice. Because the temptation in these games is to hide. It's to play very passively, it's to pop out and shoot, and only ever do that from an area of security and from the perspective of advantage. And what do you do when you can't do that? Like this just now, I can barely see that cowboy that just put me to near-death screen. I put as many rounds in his direction as I could, and I'm not even certain that I killed him. Like whatever he was using, you want to use that, because that was really painful. If two people shot me at the same time, then I was dead. And the checkpoint here is quite wide as well, you have to do a decent amount of progress. Do you see the building just in front of me to the right? There's a path down there. When you go down that avenue and you kill a few people, you'll be able to get a checkpoint. The problem here is there's a lot of people behind you, and there's people showing up on the roofs too. So you want to be very careful of where you move and what decisions you make, because if you overextend, you're going to be taking your measurements at the Undertaker's. But there's a guy over on the roof, and Thomas is doing his best to both distract and shoot at him. Thomas is very good in this game. The AI companion that you're with, I've never seen an AI companion as effective as this game, because they seem to do normal damage. I think that's maybe the reason why they seem so good. In a lot of games, your companions will hurt the enemies and shoot them a lot, but they don't do full damage. So they'll put full clips in enemies and it'll be fine, because it'll do the equivalent of one of your bullets, so that they don't steal all the kills. Whereas in this game, there's moments where if you just let Thomas do his thing, he will wreck people. That right there was a bullshit trade. I shot that guy with both guns, I didn't even register a bullet, and he put me to near death. Like, fuck you. That's the kind of stuff when you really feel the RNG of the gunplay. And admittedly, the language of the game told me that it wasn't going red, so I was out of range, but it was so close, and I even hit the guy, so that's bullshit to begin with, you know? One of those weird things. I'm not going to sit here and talk badly about this game, because I think it's wonderful, but much like every game I play, the more you play something, and especially if you play on the harder difficulties, or you do a challenge run, or you really have to demand on the mechanics and the gameplay systems, you come to realise where they fall apart, what isn't as clean and as sharp and as well versed as it could have been. And that is in no ways a massive negative on anything. It's just stress fractures will show when you put stress on anything. Trauma shows what things really are. You know, it's the same with a player, it's the same with me, it's the same with you. When you're under fire in a game, how you react to that is an indication, is the most honest indication of how good you are and what you do in that moment. Because anybody can look good when they're shooting at something that doesn't shoot back. The moment it starts shooting back, it's a little different, you know? This segment here is quite tough as well. You'll notice that I'm using this awning on the corner of this house to protect myself. There's two reasons you can get fucked here. One of them is a couple of awkward spawns when you're out. If you get caught in no man's land, you can die really quickly. The second one is your brother can die. So, I don't know why I said really quast, as if that word had a Q, but there it is. If you don't deal with these enemies quite quickly, they'll put too many shots on Thomas and Thomas will die. I failed this segment on hard, but I didn't fail this segment on very hard, so... Luckily, I learnt my lessons from the stream if you were there, and then once the rooftops have finished being assailed by the random pop-up cowboys, there's going to be a couple guys that come through the door of this, but they're so focused on Thomas, I'm able to hit them from the side and clean most of them up. And then when you get to this doorway, there's a couple more fools waiting in the saloon, but we'll take them on and hopefully get to the next segment. I was trying to think of cowboy games, though, for stuff to talk about, and I suppose the elephant in the wagon would be Red Dead Redemption 2, but I refuse to speak about that game because I just don't think it's worth the time, and I know a lot of people will be offended by that, and I don't mean to offend you, I just didn't like it. I think Red Dead Redemption 1 was superb. I think the second one was just a tech demo for a very boring game. So I can't even talk about the biggest cowboy game ever made, which most people probably love, which breaks my heart when there are considerably better games mechanically, gameplay-wise, and pretty much every perspective. So I could have talked a little bit about Gun, which I already did. You know, I talked a little bit about Red Dead Revolver, which I think is a game that is really, really fun and shares a lot of the bones of what Capcom was doing with it originally. A game which I think is superb and worth checking out. And then once you go past that, what do you talk about? You could talk about Hard West, which is a turn-based kind of like isometric strategy game, which is kind of cool. I had a lot of fun with that as we go and start shooting this guy. Another one of those moments, guys. Wait for him to stop, see if it rings. If it doesn't, get ready for another movement. And get the feeling for about 3 or 4 movements, depending on what kind of character you're taking on, and then see if you can put them down real quickly. And you're going to get those moments where you react and it takes your character 40 minutes to pull his gun up and give you a reticle, and then they kill you, because it's just the way the game works. But if you do it right, you'll smash them very quickly, very decisively. But I was thinking about Western games and trying my best not to shit on Red Dead Redemption 2. And it kind of hit me that we don't really get that many Western games. It's a completely under-realised area of video games, in my opinion. And there's a decent amount of them, don't get me wrong. Like, do you remember that one in the arcades with the light gun, where it played full motion video, and you had to shoot it? I think it was called Gunsmoke or something. I remember that game. That game was godlike. I'd probably hate it now, but when I was a kid, I just remember it being so cool. And you were holding a light gun. You could have literally been playing a tape of your mum and dad having sex to conceive you. You give me a light gun, I'm going to have fun in that moment. Be damned. Oh, by the way, guys, this part's quite tough too. For whatever reason, Call of Juarez turns the damage back up. And it's like, remember this, dude? You're on very hard. It's time to start taking huge damage. So be real careful on some of these encounters. They hit hard. I don't know if they got the good rifles for this. They were saving the good rifles next to the good cutlery for when they had guests. But look at this, look at it! Look how different the game looks and how quickly you have to get out of there or you're just going to get killed. It feels like a different game at times. And I don't know who those guys are, but the people in charge need to hire more of them because they're very capable people. But it is kind of undercovered in games, and it'd be really nice to see some in the first-person variety and in the third-person variety. Like, I'd be up for can you imagine a bullet hell shmup Western game? That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Just surrounded by old-school multicoloured bullets. But there's a lot to do with it, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you think of each culture has its kind of halcyon fantastical days that we reminisce about when we have nostalgia glasses. Look at Japan with the samurai and the ronin and the ninja, all these things that we look at as being awesome things, and then in reality probably a bunch of massive wankers. Samurai, not even remotely honourable, raping, pillaging, doing what they want, really nasty people. You know, just a different way to spell dictator, tyrant, knobheads. We look at medieval Europe, medieval knights, you know, King Arthur, all that kind of shit. Dudes running around in tin with big swords and horses, saving damsels, when in reality, gang-raping, pillaging, murderous, slovenly, nasty dudes. And then we come to America, and we have the Old West, the frontier, the cowboys and Indians. Super romanticized. In the movies, everybody's immaculately groomed and has obviously bathed this century, whereas in reality, hairy, boils, sticky, dusty, sweaty, nasty, not good, no bueno. Bad people, lots and lots of bad people. But we always romanticize it, and then you think there's quite a lot of fantasy games for the sword and sorcery, isn't there? They're coming from the medieval times. That's completely represented in video games all over the boat. We've got tons of those because it's probably number one on the list of, you know, time periods that people fantasize about. Then on the other side, we've seen a bit of a resurgence in feudal Japan getting covered. There's been a couple games that are promised that I'm quite looking forward to that. 'Cause for me, I really like the feudal Japan stuff. I like the swords, the katanas, I like all of the crazy stuff. Chopping the bamboo, gotta say it. And then on the other side, we have the Western frontier, the cowboys, the gunslingers, you know. I feel like out of the three I've mentioned, this is definitely the one that has the least representation. And it leaves you the question, doesn't it? What do you do to make this genre cool and contextualize it in a video game? Because this genre's fucking cool. The one thing against it, you could probably argue, is that it's kind of thematically beige. It's all the same colour all the time. But you can't really help that, can you? Because that's just the geography of where it comes from and the iconography of it all. Oh, by the way, guys, this is another one of those choice missions where you can go and do a bunch of bounties, kill some people, rescue some things, grab some shit, take the gold you make, buy things from the shop, and then get on with the mission. But I'm just going to be riding my horse to the next sequence, which will be the final segment of this act, and I think it's going to be another fun one. This is where we're entering a more misty valley. I think we're going to be taking on some of the pine forests and the damn dirty engines and what have you. So stay tuned for that. But I think with the Western, I think we get creatively defunct, don't we, when it comes to what would you do? Because it always comes up with the same things. Oh, there'd be a steam train at some point getting robbed. There'd be wagons and caravans getting robbed. There would be some kind of horseback thing happening. You'd have the quick draw. You'd have gun belts. You'd probably have some kind of bank robbery that involves pulling off the fucking wall because you built your houses out of wood for reasons that make a lot of sense because of the temperature and everything. You'd have those tropes, wouldn't you? The outlaws, the sheriffs, the cowboys, the Indians, so on and so forth. A lot of it is kind of, where do you find creativity, where do you go? And one of the things you seem to notice in a lot of video games with the Western motif is they go time period, don't they? You have the early West when the weapons weren't necessarily that reliable or that good yet. They weren't quite industrialized and revolutionized to the point where they were just taking over everything. And, you know, the country was just being founded, so the natives had a lot more going for them, and they were a lot more dominant, and it was a bit more ambiguous over who was the superpower and what was happening. And then you have the later period where, you know, civilization came to the West, so to speak, and they were bringing things like vehicles and different fashion senses and taking away the gunslingers' gun belts and the laws to have an open firearm. You have those two to contrast, don't you? The blossoming of the culture and of that generation and that era, and then conversely, you have the fall of the old guard. Oh, it's this mission. So, yeah, once you hit that guy with the chair, you are now going to be tasked with gunning your way out of this area and escaping. And this is a mission that can be very, very difficult if you play it the wrong way. But as you can see, I have a high-level volcano pistol, and that's going to do all the work I need it to do because it's going to be singing like a songbird and signalling the destruction of everybody I point it at. So enjoy. But that's what they do with the Western, don't they? They choose those time periods to add that interesting thing because then they can have cars and then they can have, you know, the burgeoning and growing technologies. Whereas instead of being more creative with it, I suppose one of the other areas they go creative with is they add the supernatural. You know, they go with the ghosts or the monsters, or they bring different things and cross-pollinate the fantasies. Whereas I suppose there's a lot of creativity there, you just have to come up with it, don't you? And any new kind of creativity is really difficult. And then when it happens, everybody looks at it and goes, oh my god, it's so obvious, how did I not think of it? How does everyone not think of it? Why is it in everything? But for whatever reason, it just wasn't there at the time. And thus, it's an innovation and we enjoy it. But what would you do with the Western genre, guys? If you were making a game and it was Western themed and you wanted to hit some new territory, do something new, what would be the angle that you work on from? Because I'm always reminded of Duke Nukem. Can you remember Duke Nukem, A Time to Kill? It was the first of the third-person Duke Nukems, I think. There was Time to Kill, there was Land of Babes, and there was 0 Hour on the N64. These games were very difficult. Very cool, though, and Duke Nukem had always conventionally been a first-person shooter, but then they pulled back the perspective, and it became almost like a Tomb Raider game. There was the platforming, there was the mild puzzle solving, and then there was a third-person perspective and the gunplay with the double pistols and the deagles and everything. That was a cool game that did a lot of interesting things, but then when you played it, you realised you were going all over the place. It was essentially like watching a James Bond movie where Bond goes to 7 different countries, wears 7 different outfits, and they're all thematically different because they're so diverse. You know, one's snowy, one's tropical, you know, one's urban, so on and so forth. And that's kind of what that game became. It was that JRPG adventure of seeing every possible temperature and climate before coming back to a huge tower, bathed and cloaked in fog, where you take on some wizard who's done bad shit. And that's what that game was. So the segment that was the Wild West was only kind of a snippet of it. And I wonder if that's a good direction to go when it comes to the frontier, because then you don't put everything on it, don't you? You don't go full into it and get people bored and worn out of the aesthetic. Because I'll say something nice about Red Dead Redemption 2, as much as I'm a big critiquer of that game. I had a lot of fun role-playing in that game, and it's usually something that I don't care too much about. But I wanted to be a scumbag, and I was a scumbag, and I did horrible, heinous things in that game, and the game allowed me to do it. I was a goddamn terror of the open trail, and it was fun. And it was the most fun I had, where I was making my own adventure, which is another fundamental thing I massively disagree with, because when you buy a game, the adventure should be made for you. I don't think it should be an ingredient pot for you to add the special something for it to be fun, because then, to me, in my opinion, that's more of a tool than it is a toy. It's the same with the Minecrafts and things like that. Anything where the fun comes from your creative application of a tool set, you might as well be selling somebody fucking Photoshop. Digital Photoshop, that's what it is for me. And I believe in the craftsmanship, and I believe in the sanctity of sculpting an adventure, giving somebody a narrative to weave their way through and making the fun part of that journey. And that's, you know, another reason why I can say negative things about Red Dead. This is the video where Chris shoots himself in the foot by saying bad things about game that is universally loved by everybody. Welcome to my channel, by the way. I know you won't be stopping long after you've dropped a dislike, but it was nice to have you here, and we don't always shit on Red Dead Redemption 2. Only sometimes we do. But this is another segment where this is going to look a lot easier than it is in some ways, guys, because there comes a point in this campaign where you're really sharp and really well versed with just flicking onto the baddies and putting them down with some quick shots. And the game works so well at times when it's not stealing your bullets and giving you ghost rounds and trolling you, that you do feel really capable. Like, look at that. 2 guys dead immediately. The quick reload. There's an explosive barrel just there. Put that down. Guy just there gets stunned. Shoot him while he's stunned, and then put some bullets on his friend, but I'm not doing a lot of damage because I'm using the classic gun that's weak as piss. And that's an entire room of dudes just felled in an instant. And you never felt like I was really in danger. If this was a book or a movie right now, it would be horrible. Because, of course, any good drama is built on risk. It's built on believing there is something at stake. If you can't convey to your audience that your hero is in danger or in some way is vulnerable, then he's a boring hero, because if he always wins, there's nothing to root for. It's the classic conundrum that Star Wars is facing when Rey has done zero training and knows everything and is a master of everything. She's boring. She has no pathos. There's no development there. There's no learning. There's no growth. Or it just doesn't work. And that's the problem that this would have if it was a different medium. However, this is a video game, and in a video game, unless we're talking about the story, feeling like a badass and being invulnerable because you're playing at a level that the game can't keep up with you is a really good place to be, because it enables you to have that power fantasy and have a good time. And if you're just doing this to beat the difficulty and get to the end, then you are being successful because you're spending less time playing the game. Look at all the rusty guns. This is bullshit. We're on, what is this, Act 3, Act 4 of the game, and they're still giving us rusty guns, the dirty buggers. How dare they? I mean, I'm grateful. When you get to the fort at the end of the game, those guys all have ridiculous guns, and you have to play a level there as Thomas, and because Thomas feels weaker than Ray does, if you get shot in that segment, you are always 1 bullet away from death. It's so dangerous. Luckily, you can be really quick on that segment, and I'm going to show you a way to kind of power through it. Look at that, damn. Here's me saying how invincible we feel, and then I nearly get killed by a jobber on a mountain. Go back to your cave, son. Reload your guns, try to hide. Don't touch your keys accidentally or you'll start doing bloody breakdancing outside the barrel. Like, it's so interesting how the cover in this game works, because it works so well, but then it works too well at times, and it starts making you vulnerable and feeling really inconsistent. But for the time, dynamic cover systems have been something, even right now in 2019, that we're having difficulty with. But there was a transition there, guys, because there's a segment of talking on this elevator that I've trimmed out, and then once you get to this certain part, they're going to start throwing dynamite your way. But if you hit the dynamite really quickly, you're never in any kind of danger. Unfortunately for me, playing on mouse and keyboard is just about clicking the heads, right? which I haven't talked too much about that particular ignorant perspective, but I'm probably going to in the next video because I find that to be hilarious. This notion that mouse and keyboard is so easy, all you do is like point and click. Like, don't get me wrong, mouse and keyboard is a very, very good input method, and I'm in love with it at the moment because I'm learning it for myself. But it ain't easy to have good aim. It's easy to have aim, it ain't easy to have good aim. And I suppose the ultimate argument against it, before we get into it as a topic, is why do people watch Shroud, you know? To these people who really do think it's just as easy as pointing and clicking on heads, why does anybody watch Shroud? Because I would wager it's not for his charismatic and bubbly, talkative, interesting and downright addictive personality. I don't think that's why they watch him, guys. I think they watch Shroud because his aim is so good, he makes everybody else he plays against look silly. And if it's just point and shoot, why doesn't everybody have Shroud aim? Why isn't Shroud unheard of and unknown? You know? And don't get me wrong, the people that are sitting listening to this, I would imagine that you're more learned than that, you've played enough video games. And this is actually a dangerous moment, this, because there's a guy with a portable Gatling gun, and he will kill you almost instantly if you're not careful. So be very careful with this guy. Never pop out unless you're fully healed, and then always try to hit him when he can't hit you, and then there he is, he's dead. Luckily, he doesn't take a lot of damage, so you can just murk him like that. But I like to think that the people that have sat this long into this video are the people that are wanting to better themselves, are the people that are interested perhaps with the conversation or the topic, or are just wanting to watch some cowboy action goodness. And I like to think that you understand what you do when it comes to playing a game, what your agency is, what your ability is, and just how deep that skill pool is. Because it's the notion of, like a controller user, isn't it, how the aim assist does all the work, which is absolutely not true. Aim assist does a lot of the work, and it's very, very helpful, but there's a big difference between somebody who's good on controller and someone who's not, and that is nothing to do with the aim assist, because a bad player gets the same aim assist as a good one does. And mouse and keyboard, although there is no assistance at all on that, outside of some strange instances like in this game, but fundamentally, the difference between a good mouse user and a bad mouse user is ridiculous, you know? It's so huge. And the ignorance that you need to even make such a strange statement tells me you've never played mouse and keyboard competitively against somebody who was better than you. You can't have, you know? But then again, I suppose in your mind, if you truly believe that, no one's better than you because all you have to do is point and click on the heads. But couldn't you use that argument against controller? All you have to do is push the analog towards the people, and then the aim assist does the rest? Like, it's such a strange and willfully myopic perspective for me. I don't really know how anybody could have that as an opinion. I suppose we're in the age of the internet, aren't we, where if you can think of something retarded, somebody's probably said it, somebody's believed it, and somebody will probably die on a hill fighting for it. You know, when people can think all kinds of bizarre things, like the earth is flat, or believing in angels, or believing that vaccinations cause Down syndrome, which, that one to me is such an interesting one, isn't it? Do you believe that vaccinations cause Down syndrome, or do you just want to see more dead kids? Because I can't really justify the mind that would willfully not want its child inoculated. You know, all of these diseases we've got rid of because of that type of science that you want to deny. Like, I don't even know where to begin. Thank you for watching though, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're enjoying the walkthrough. I hope you're enjoying the cowboy talk. And I'm looking forward to reading the comments to see what kind of cowboy game you would make. Because who knows, in 10 years I might be playing it and complaining about what I don't think works very well. Thank you for watching, and you take care now.